Alright, in this video today, kids, what we're going to do is talk about using absolute value to compare changes. Okay? Now, some of the things that you might use absolute value to compare would be stuff like savings account changes. Okay? They will go up and down in terms of how you save. Okay? Some months you save a lot, sometimes you save a little. Price changes. Sometimes changes will go up and down. Gas prices are a good example of that. They can be measured in positive and negative growth, but absolute value is how you would determine the change. Sports score changes over seasons, from this season to that season. Temperature changes from day to day, month to month, season to season. Test scores. Test scores are a good one, especially when you think about PSSA and standardized testing. So anyways, what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at a couple more slides related to absolute value and how you would compare them. All right. So the first slide that we're going to talk about is, let's talk about actually looking at changes in savings. Okay? And when we look at the changes in savings here, I'm going to move this down a little bit, make it a little bit easier for us to read. Okay? When we look at this, let's look at comparing changes in savings. Okay, and here's the situation. Cassie's goal is to save $50 a month. So that's what she wants to do every month. She wants to put that much in the bank. But some months she's going to try and put more in, and some months she might not be able to put that in based on other bills she has to pay. Now, keep in mind these things right here. When Cassie meets her goal, there is no change. So if Cassie puts in exactly $50, there's really no change in her savings per month. In other words, she's saving her goal. Now, when she saves more money than her goal, the change is positive. Okay? So if she puts in $52, she has $2 of positive change. Alright? When she saves less than her goal, the change is negative. Okay? So if she were only able to save $45, she would have a negative 5 change. In other words, it would be a change of $5 that she was unable to save. It would be a negative change. Okay, so here's her savings. She started keeping track. She started in October and then kept track as she went. Now, when you look at this, okay, it tells you the month that she saved and how much change there was. And here is the change in savings goal. Okay, so in October, we know that this is a positive 11. So in October, she actually saved $11 over her $50, so she had a positive change. In November, she saved $24 over what she wanted to save. So she saved the 24 and the 50, okay, which is kind of nice. So that's really good for October and November. And then in December, however, there was a negative $32 change in what she wanted to do. So she did not save very much, did she, in November? Okay, so she didn't meet her goal by $32. Okay, and then in January, she saved $9 more, so that's a positive change. In January or February, she's back down to negative change. In other words, she was only able to save $42 in February because there was a negative 8 change. And then in March, she's back on track and she saves $23 more. Now, in a situation like this, we could start comparing and saying, okay, you know, when did she save the most, when did she save the least, and when was the greatest change, and when did the least change occur? Now, it's interesting if you look at this, but think about what goes on in December, okay? In December, you have Christmas, where it's a lot harder to save money, okay? So that gives you an idea of what might have happened there. Then in January, she's back on track. She's probably not saving as much as she wants to because she's kind of just, you know, working to get back from Christmas. But then in February, she has a negative change again. Now, in February, you got Valentine's Day, so another holiday that you might see somebody spending their savings money on, okay? And then in March, she's back on track. So anyways, that's Cassie's goal and her situation, okay? Now, the question we might ask is this. Okay, the question we might ask is, which 2 months did Cassie have the greatest change in her savings? Okay, so which of these months did she have the greatest change? Now, we're not talking, about a positive or a negative, amount at this point. We're asking for a change from her goal, okay? So to answer this question, you need to do the following steps. Number 1, you need to find the absolute values for each amount. So the first step is to convert each of these into absolute values. All right? Then use the positive values to order the amounts. So once you change these into absolute values, you will then be able to order them. And then the third step is to determine the greatest and the least based on the question. So whatever it is you want to know, ours is, which 2 months did Cassie have the greatest change in her savings? That's what we would do after we've done step 1, finding absolute values, step 2, creating positive values to order, and then we could answer our question. So we're going to take a look at this. And here is how we might find ourselves solving this problem. Okay? So what we do is, the first thing that we want to do is we want to create absolute values for each month. Okay? So we're going to take the absolute value of 11, and we're going to say we want the absolute value of 11 and get the whole number 11. We want the absolute value for November's amounts, and that is 24. It's not very good, 24. The absolute value for December, even though it's a negative 32, that's a change. That means that she didn't save what she wanted to. She saved a negative amount, and in other words, she didn't meet her goal. Okay, the absolute value would be 32. January, she had a positive 9, so the absolute value for 9 would be 9. The absolute value for February's negative 8 would be 8, and the absolute value for March would be 23. Okay? So now we have our absolute values, and we can actually look on a number line here and say, okay, on a number line, what would this look like? Well, down here, we have an absolute value for October. October's line would be there, okay? And then when we look at November, November's value would be right here, okay? And then when we look at December, okay, its value is all the way over here, and it is a negative 32 because it's in the negative. But remember, we're looking for the absolute value, and we're going to write it as a positive number. But you can see the distance from 0 is much greater than anything else. So that kind of is helping us answer our question already. All right. Then we have January, which has an absolute value and a positive 9. Okay. And then when we look at February, February's right here. Even though it is a negative 8, okay, if we look at the absolute value of that, it is 8, and you can see that's not a very big line. And then back here in March, we have 23, and that will give us an absolute value of 23. So now that we have our amounts as whole numbers, we can then begin comparing them. So in other words, our question was, back to this, which 2 months did Cassie have the greatest change in her savings? Well, 32 is definitely the greatest out of all of these, and then 24 is the second greatest amount. And so you can see that the months that she had the greatest change were the months of November and December. Okay, and even though this was a negative change, if we look at absolute values, it tells us that it was 32 units of change, and in November it was 24 units of change. And so these are the ones that gave you the greatest amounts of change. Okay, and that's how you would use absolute value in certain situations. Now, let's take a look at comparing some things. Okay, let's actually compare some values. Okay, use the absolute value to compare the following integers. Alright, so at this point you can pause the video and try doing these yourself, or you can wait a moment or two and I will show you how to solve those. So pause the video now and give it a try, or just wait a moment and we'll go over them. Okay, here we go. They want us to use the absolute value to compare the following integers. Okay, well, in this case they're saying the absolute value of 76. Well, the absolute value of 76, of course, is 76. The absolute value of negative 36 would be 36. Now, these are both positive numbers now, and if you picture them on a number line, like so, starting at 0, obviously 36 is what you will reach first, and then 76 you will reach last. On the number line, going further right from 0 is the greater number. So in this case, 76 is greater, so an absolute value of 76 is greater than the absolute value of negative 36. Okay? Over here you have a kind of a different situation. They're asking you to compare the following integers. 41 compared to the absolute value of 42 and 3/10. Okay, well, in this case, 41, if you create the absolute value, it's just going to remain 41. For 42 and 3/10, its absolute value, even though there's a decimal, is going to be 42 and 3/10. And of course, if we're comparing on the number line, okay, and going along on the number line, you will reach, if you start at 0, you will reach 41 before you reach 42. Regardless of this decimal, that's just a little bit further than 42, but 42 is still after 41 going from left to right. So, in this case, 41 is less than the absolute value of 42 and 3/10. And notice how I said that. 41 less than the absolute value of for 42 and 3/10. Okay? So be very careful when you're reading those and writing down your answers. Alright, let's try another activity with absolute value and ordering. Okay? Kind of hard to read here. The order the values from least to greatest. So here are the values, and you can pause the video and try to order these yourself, or you can wait a moment and see how we actually do it. But if you're going to do them yourself, pause the video now. Okay, maybe you're ready to compare your answers to what we come up with here, or maybe you just want to see how we do this. Here we go. They want you to find the absolute value for each of these in order to compare them. Well, the absolute value of negative 99 is 99. The absolute value for 0 is 0. The absolute value for negative 62 is 62. The absolute value for 98 and 5/100 is 98 and 5/100. Now just remember, this is 98, and if you're on a number line, you're going to go 97, 98, on your way to 99, but in between 98 and 99, you've got 0.5, 0.6, you've got tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So this number is actually somewhere in between 98 and 99. It's somewhere on the number line in between those two amounts. All right? So keep that in mind. All right? So now we have whole numbers that we can look at, positive whole numbers, or positive numbers, and we want to order them from least to greatest. So 0 is definitely the lowest, okay? So we're going to put 0 first because it has a lower positive value than anything else. Then we have 62. Now remember, we're talking about original absolute value, so we're going to put in our symbols. Negative 62, okay, the absolute value of negative 62 is greater than the absolute value of 0. And then we have the absolute value of 98 and 5/100, so we're going to write 98 and 5/100 absolute value, okay? And then our greatest absolute value is the absolute value for 99. Okay? And so that's our ordering from least to greatest. All right? Now, this one down here, same situation as above. We create positive values. So this would be a positive, on the number line, you would go into the negatives 1.5 units to the left, but again, it's absolute value, so we're going to write it in a positive amount. This is 23, so it has an absolute value of 23. Negative 23 has an absolute value of 23. Negative 7 has an absolute value of 7. Negative 9 has an absolute value of 9. So now we have all positive numbers to order from least to greatest. And obviously 1, the whole number 1, is lower than 23, 7, and 9. So our lowest absolute value would be the absolute value for negative 1.5. Then our next lowest one is the absolute value for negative 7. So we're going to write negative 7 absolute value. And that is followed by negative 9's absolute value. So we're going to write the absolute value for negative 9. Because remember, they're talking about whole number amounts here. And then the final one, the greatest one, is the absolute value for negative 23. Okay? And so that's how you would order these. You're just remembering to write everything back as absolute value symbols and then using the positive amounts to order. Okay? If you have any further questions, you can see your teacher or you can check your book for resources and help there.